His name is Sir James Goldsmith, and he wants Britain to vote for him and his party at the next election. What's he up to and why? Good afternoon. A British general election would not be the same without Miss Whiplash or Screaming Lord Such. But when someone comes on the scene promising to spend what it takes, and at least as much as the combined total spent by the three main parties at the last election, to field some 600 candidates, then that is no ordinary fringe party. That someone is Sir James Goldsmith, one of the world's most successful financiers and entrepreneurs who's now left the business world to enter the political arena. He already has a seat in the European Parliament as a French MEP. Now he's going to stand in the next general election in this country as the leader of the Referendum Party, which he founded last year. His pitch is simple. The politicians of Britain, and I quote, are a fifth-rate bunch who've already sold our sovereignty to Brussels. For this reason, he says, and again I quote, the next election will be a masquerade of no importance. And he believes that it's time for the people to have their say on Europe, yes or no to what has been done in their name. In our audience, a cross-section of the voting public and individuals with very strong views on this issue, supporters of his referendum party and advocates of ever closer European Union. How will they judge Sir James and his case? Sir James, the election a masquerade? What's the point, you say, of electing a government when all the power of government has already been transferred to Brussels? They've lost. They've already transferred their sovereignty. That's what you told Sir David Frost last week. That's a rant, isn't it? It's simply not true.
I didn't say that. What I said was that in ever-increasing quantities, the supreme power of the law had passed to Europe on an ever-increasing range of issues. You've got to remember that when this country decided to stay in Europe, there was a referendum, 1975. And at that referendum, in which I voted yes, we were told it was to create an economic community, a free trade area within Europe, and we were told quite specifically, and this is an old quote, but it's a very fundamental one, certainly convinced me, that there is no question, and I'm quoting, of any erosion of essential national sovereignty. Now, since then, the community has been totally transformed from an economic community to a political community. It has been transformed in a way in which the Germans themselves, Mr. Lammers, you know, the September 1999 report of the views of the ruling coalition, said that what was needed was one country, one government, one parliament. That
is certainly the German view. Now, I want to take you along the route that you've just outlined. First of all, of course, the core question is whether there has been an erosion of essential sovereignty. The word is essential, and that was the core of the very fierce debate in 1975, at the end of which you voted in favour. And incidentally, you say you didn't say that to Sir David Frost. I quote you exactly. Electing a government when all the power of government has already been transferred to Brussels. I took it off the transcript.
Well, yes.
Already, or and is being. Or
I explained it. I will explain it again. If
but can I ask you this? And essentially, I don't want to stop you making the case. Essentially, your case is this, if I put it in simple terms, that British sovereignty has been hijacked by Maastricht, put on a conveyor belt to a European superstate, and then you illustrate some key areas to make that point. Is that the core of your position?
Well, I'd like to define sovereignty. The basic elements of sovereignty are the right for a nation to enact its own laws, and for those laws to be supreme, in other words, not to be overturned in any other court outside the borders of that country. That is number one. And in that case, we know, we've had judgments which show that for instance, let me quote from a British judge, the treaty, this is British judges, the treaty is the supreme, the treaty being the Maastricht Treaty, the Treaty of Rome as amended by the Treaty of Maastricht. The treaty is the supreme law of this country, taking precedence over acts of Parliament. And what does the European Court of Justice say? It says every national court must apply community law in its entirety and must accordingly set aside any provision of national law which may conflict with it. Now that supremacy of European law over national law, which is undoubted, unequivocal, those words, originally applied to commercial considerations within the Treaty of Rome, which was to create a common market, and on a limited number of commercial considerations. The area of application has been broadened enormously.
So that's one area.
Right.
Now, just the other areas, if I can, because I want to go through them,
yes,
are border controls, sovereignty over your borders, sovereignty over foreign policy, and sovereignty over economic policy. Those are the four key things, aren't they?
I would say those.
Right. Now, I want to take you through two or three of those, and I'll come back to what you said about the courts at the end of it. And I want to put it to you directly, but I hope you won't think offensively, that in order to sell your message on this, you exaggerate, you distort the evidence, and perhaps unwittingly make statements which are demonstrably false. In the case of border controls, specifically, member states are not required to hand over sovereignty over their borders, and Britain specifically has not so done.
Let me answer. The border, your accusation is wrong, and I will tell you why. Because what I said, and said quite specifically and in detail yesterday, and was recorded on television, and I think you got a copy, what I said was that the border agreements were subject to intergovernmental agreements. That's to say, it was not what is known as communitarized, not done by the European community. That meant that governments could decide for themselves, and that those who wished to opt out could opt out. That was known as the Treaty of Schengen. It was not part, I must finish this, it was not part of the Treaty of Maastricht. Yet, the European Commission came to the European Assembly, of which I'm a member, and I heard them speak it. They proposed last year that the whole of the Treaty of Schengen should be communitarized, should be brought under their control, and that the individual power of governments should no longer be valid, and that it should move from the intergovernmental to the community system. And that is specifically what I said yesterday, nothing else.
But what you have said is that we have lost or are losing a control over our borders.
No,
the fact is, let me just put this to you, the fact is that under the Single European Act, not the Maastricht Treaty, but under the Single European Act 10 years ago, member states have the right, I quote, to take such measures as they consider necessary to control immigration from outside Europe, the European Union, to combat terrorism, crime, etc. And because of that, Britain has not surrendered its borders. It is not signed up in Schengen.
The words that I used yesterday was that the control of borders was threatened. That was the particular word.
So you're not now... you're not saying that they are actually taken over.
What I said was it was being proposed by the European Commission, quite formally, that it should be taken out of the hands of government and placed in the hands of the European institutions.
But they can propose what they like. There is also a veto. There's a veto. And the British government, on all adaptations, modifications of that kind, has a veto, and the Prime Minister's made it very clear he will veto any extension that would lead to a surrender of sovereignty.
The British government has also said in its document, let me just find the appropriate document, in clause 12 of the white paper put forward by the British government for the IGC, which was called the Partnership of Nations and sounded excellent from its title. Clause 12 said, we must be realistic about, I'm quoting, about the sort of changes we can hope to achieve. We would do better, therefore, to concentrate on achieving sensible amendments in the areas which have been identified for review. I believe that you don't try and amend, you reject. The idea that Schengen, the Treaty of Schengen, the control of one's borders, can be eliminated.
To which Britain is not a signatory.
But it doesn't matter, because we're trying, that the whole purpose of the European institutions is to take away from the right of governments. To take away from the right of government.
But this is the view that it may be the purpose of some people. It's not the purpose of some people. It's the purpose of those people who now control us. Because you believe that the...
And let me go further. Let me give you another quote. Let me give you another quote.
Well, can we move on to another area?
No, I must finish this because you are wrong.
Because you're claiming that something is going to happen rather than something has happened.
No. I said it was under threat. And there can be no greater threat than a community proposal from the Commission, because up till now they've got their way. And up till now in this country it has been a series of appeasement, and in France it has been a series of purely obsequious behaviour.
Now,
and
hang on,
I must answer this.
You have answered it.
No, I have not fully. I must answer this fully. The members of Parliament, Conservative members of Parliament, linked to this government, are associated with the European People's Party in the European Parliament. The opening words to their proposal for the Intergovernmental Conference, theirs, not the Commission, Conservative members of Parliament of the European Parliament, MEPs.
But governments dispose, not the members of the European Parliament, Sir James. You know that very well. You don't dispose in the European Parliament, you propose.
This is the whole of the group.
Yeah,
and what do they say? Why haven't
frankly, so what? It's the Government Council of Ministers that says, and Britain has a veto, and has said we will exercise a veto.
You have just said... No, they have not said you've exercised a veto.
They have the right to exercise
but they haven't. That's why we have appeased all the way along.
Okay,
that is why we have gone from... that's why we've gone from a grouping of an economic community of sovereign nations into a situation where we are moving inexorably towards supranationality, supranational state.
Now, I'm going to move on.
I still want to quote this. I still want to quote this. The quote from the Conservative MEPs.
I don't know why you're using the MEPs, because they're not in charge.
Because they are a Conservative party who's supposed to be representing Britain's Conservative Party in the European Parliament. You might not like what they say, and I would agree with you. And maybe you don't want to hear it in your program. But you're going to hear it nonetheless. And this is what they said. And I'm quoting.
Go on.
They say the opening of the IGC document proposals, the European Union points the way to a united Europe. Our aim is a union built on the principles of federalism. Now, that is in direct contradiction to the white paper which had been put forward by the British government.
Precisely. And as I think political aficionados know, the MEPs are not necessarily representative of the British government, and most people in this country would say that the British government exercises the final responsibility in this area. Now, I'm going to go on now.
And the British government is not necessarily representative of the British people.
Well, that may be a good demagogic point, but
it's also a factual point.
It's an electoral.
It's also a factual point according to all the opinion polls.
We have an electoral system here, Sir James, which most people seek to respect. Now, let me come to
and that is what I'm participating in, and following the rules, and entering a perfectly normal democratic combat according to those rules.
Don't get overexcited. Don't get overexcited.
No. I'm just trying to correct you if you go too far.
Let me come to. I seek not to go too far.
Good.
Let's come to economic policy. It is fundamental to your case that Britain has already lost sovereignty over our economy. Your statement is that the opt-out from the single currency is a total fraud, and the reason you give, and I quote you precisely, even if Britain wants to opt out of the single currency, it's still committed to running its economy for the benefit of the community as a whole, regulating its monetary policy and its exchange rates for the common benefit. That statement, I put it to you, is simply not true.
Then you have not read the Treaty of Maastricht. I refer you to Article 109 of the Treaty of Maastricht. And in Article 109 of the Treaty of Maastricht, you will see that...
I'll read it to you. It says, until the beginning of the third stage, each member state shall treat its exchange rate policy as a matter of common interest, doesn't it?
That's correct.
Yes. There is a protocol in that treaty.
Yes.
And I don't know whether you, sir, have read the protocol,
yes.
Which says, Protocol Para 6, that article, the one you've just identified and yourself referred to, shall apply to the United Kingdom as if it had a derogation. That's to say, it has an opt-out from that.
But you don't understand what derogation means. A derogation is a country that wishes to join the single currency, but has not yet been able to achieve the convergence criteria.
Or does not seek to achieve.
No, you then have two others, not a question. If they achieve it, they have no choice, unless they have the opt-out. Now, both Denmark and Britain has the opt-out.
Exactly.
But exactly.
So they're not bound by its common policy.
Now let me explain to you what the opt-out means. The opt-out, EMU, the European Monetary Union, has three phases. Phases 1, Phase 2, and, as you might expect, Phase 3. The opt-out applies to Phase 3 only, which is a single currency. Under phase 1 and phase 2, the British government is committed, firstly, to running its exchange policy, exchange rate policy, to, the words are the common interest.
No, I'm sorry, Sir James, that is factually incorrect. It specifically says in the protocol, the article, these are boring things, but they're important. Article 109 certainly says that member states shall do that.
Yes.
But in the protocol, in here, and I can find the exact page right there, and I'm quoting from it. Protocol para 6, Article 109M, namely the one that makes that requirement, does not apply to the United Kingdom.
It does. United Kingdom. It does for the common interest.
Well, hang on, no, it doesn't. Frankly, it does. It is clear here that unless you don't believe what the protocol says, I know you're very suspicious of Europe, but the protocol says something which has the weight of law, namely derogation, which means opt-out from that requirement to follow the common interest, which was crucial in the Maastricht negotiation. Britain is free in this period, I suggest to you, to follow its own economic policy.
Well, it goes on to say, in exactly the same vein, which confirms what I've just said, is member states shall regard their economic policies as a matter of common concern.
Yes, that's quite true.
It also says that member states should conduct their economic policies with a view to contributing to the objectives of the community as defined in Article 102. And therefore, the whole basis of EMU is to reach a convergence of all these communities, which is, of course, junk, for the simple reason you're not going to be able to reach convergence between Greece and the Netherlands, or between Portugal and Germany, or what have you. But the whole substance is that there should be convergence.
All of that may be true.
All
of that may be true, Sir James, but you simply cannot, that may be true, but you simply cannot, I suggest to you, run away from the fact that the protocol specially drawn up for Britain, specifically referring to the area that you are referring to now, give Britain, from that as well as stage 3, an unambiguous opt-out. Listen to this. Para 4, the UK, this is saying why all of what you said does not apply to Britain. The UK shall retain its power in the field of monetary policy according to national law.
And national law is subject to what?
No, it is subject to what?
Subject to European law.
No.
But it is.
I'm sorry.
It is.
The national law is subject to European law when there is a European agreement in specific relation to the policy. In this case,
there is a European agreement.
I don't think, I have to put this to you. No politician, however strong their views coming into this studio, have I come across who, faced with the stated facts, is prepared to fly in the face of them simply in order to pursue the point which you wish to make, is that we are completely locked in and no escape.
Before making these points, I took advice from a number of counsel in this country and in France.
Did you ask the European Union?
Would I ask the European Union? The European Union has an £80 million propaganda budget for the euro, and I would like to quote why they've got that. I'm delighted you should ask that. What do they say?
Frankly, it's a propaganda point you're making, Sir James.
I am making the propaganda point because they are having a propaganda campaign. Thank you. The Commission's budget is £80 million, so as to have the sort of propaganda you are now giving on the euro. And this is what it quotes for its £80 million in its own documents. Now, quote, "It is one of the instruments, in other words, the propaganda, for citizens to think along European lines," and I continue to quote, "to shape public opinion because the general public is not yet sufficiently committed to the European ideal." This is exactly what you are doing today.
No, Sir James.
You are flying at the moment. Your interpretation of both common concern and common interest is contrary to that of most constitutionalists.
Sir James.
It will be decided, our argument will be decided by the European Court of Justice. The European Court of Justice is a federal court. Only 4 of its judges will qualify as judges in this country. Its terms of reference are to move towards...
It sounds very xenophobic about these judges. Only 4 qualified in this country. They're all eminent, distinguished lawyers.
They are not. Most of them are second-rate politicians who've been pushed there.
Now, I want to stick with this protocol for a moment, because you have built a core part of your case for the need, for your passion, which you're expressing now for a referendum, on the grounds that the 5th-rate men of straw, this government, have surrendered sovereignty already because they are at the moment in stage 2 locked into a process. I'm putting to you, and doubtless other people may put it to you as well, that the protocol, which has the status of international law and says quite clearly Britain has a derogation from all of it.
And I do not, I reject that. It has derogation from stage 3 and stage 3 only, and that will be decided by the European Court.
I'm sorry, Sir James, how can you say that? I'm going to do this once more.
You can go on forever.
No, but you can't just, if you just reject what is stated, then your credibility is... Your credibility is...
But I think that your credibility is, because I think that what you are doing is reading the official propaganda and spouting it.
Is that the official propaganda?
Yes, sir, and everything else is coming out. And therefore, if you want that, but that is...
When this says on certain provisions relating to the United Kingdom and Great Britain and Northern Ireland, that is a piece of propaganda, not of law.
Let me tell you something.
Is that propaganda, not law?
Let me tell you something.
Just ask
the interpretation. I've already read you Article 102, Article 109. Rather than get into this, let me just ask you a question. Is this not proving the fact that what we need is a full debate in the referendum? Are you trying to deny to us that we've been lied to, systematically since 1970? Does this not show that in 1970 we were lied to? In 1973 the Treaty of Maastricht was signed. In 1975 we had a referendum on a totally different structure of Europe, nothing to do about a single federal superstate, nothing to do about one government, one parliament, which all our friends, so to speak, were the governments of Europe, not the peoples. The peoples are with us on this issue. It is only the governments who are isolated from their people. Does this not show that what we need is a debate, as there's been such a major change, and after this debate, the people decide again on the facts as they are now in 1775? See, why do you reject?
I haven't rejected any of that. I wouldn't. It's not my job. It's not my job.
Then I should explain to you what the Referendum Party is.
I'll let you. Just in the first, just before you continue, there are views about whether or not it is a good or bad thing, whether or not there should or shouldn't be a referendum. Of course. And I haven't begun to suggest that you should not say there ought to be a referendum. What I'm saying is to you, suggesting to you, is that when you use as your argument, and I do quote you accurately, we have surrendered, or we are in the process of surrendering all our sovereignty, we've lost it, you are distorting the truth in order to propagandize. You are distorting my words, because I used the words threatened for the second and third pillar. Well, you made it yesterday, but on television last week you didn't, and John Humphrey didn't.
The second and third pillar, I did not. I mean, it's very easy to throw these things out, but it doesn't matter.
It does matter. Words matter, Sir James. Words matter.
Second and third pillar, what it doesn't matter is on the principle of the Referendum Party. But on the second and third pillar,
say what you like in order to win the argument?
No, which is foreign policy, you can have a disagreement on interpretation of words, which will be determined by the court. What I think you're doing is spouting propaganda.
I've only
Sir
James,
yes.
you say. I mean, you're welcome to say what you want to me. I am but a humble seeker after truth, as you know. What I say back to you is all I have done is to quote, not from any opinions, but from either your own words or from... hold on a second. Or from the official statement, document of the Treaty on the European Union. And now that is not, unless you believe that is propaganda.
You are interpreting the law in a way which is contrary to the general interpretation. That is what you're doing there. And insofar you are misquoting me, because I did not say, and the text is there, and I will challenge to with this, I said that we, with those other points, which were the second and third pillars, security, foreign policy, and borders, were threatened. And I explained the intergovernment nature of Schengen, and the fact that there was a proposal that it should be taken away from the nations. So that it was a direct misquote.
So sovereignty hasn't gone. So you don't believe sovereignty hasn't gone, what you believe is threatened.
No, what I'm saying is...
It hasn't gone.
Listen to me a second. What I am saying is that on law, we've got perfectly clear statement that sovereignty has gone on issues of law on large and growing areas. Secondly, that the rest of sovereignty is under threat because everybody is for it except for this government, and that we are faced in this government with a clear choice. A government which is systematically appeased and given in, and an opposition whose leaders want to embrace this full superstate with enthusiasm. And what I'm saying is it's time that Britain have an alternative to those two choices.
Yes, now you put that case... You put that case with passion and with eloquence, no doubt about it. All I have done is to suggest to you that in articulating that case, in warming people up to it, you distort the facts and state falsehoods.
And
now, we're going to pause
that.
there. I know you do.
I
know you do. We're going to pause there. You've heard what Sir James Goldsmith says and how he argues his case. What's our audience going to make of it? You can find out after the break. Welcome back. In the first part of this programme, I asked Sir James Goldsmith about his views on Europe. Now we're going to go straight to our audience. We had a lively discussion in which I suggested that Sir James played fast and loose with the facts, and he has vigorously denied that. Who would like to come in on his approach and his general style in setting up this new party? The man 3 in second row wearing the suit and the glasses.
I think many of us would like to know what the referendum question is that you intend the government to put to the British people. Would it be a simple question such as, should Great Britain be a member of the European Union? And if candidates are not in favour of that particular referendum, is it your policy that your party will stand candidates against in those constituencies?
Thank you. The purpose of the referendum is absolutely simple. It is to have a referendum on who governs Britain, Westminster or Brussels. That is all. It can welcome people who are for a superstate, or for a family of nations, or for the Norwegian system. It can welcome everybody, because what is needed is the sort of debate we've had this morning, inconclusive, but there must be a conclusion. This is the biggest single decision a nation can make. Should it survive as a nation, or should it be fused with 24 other nations into a superstate?
And what have you got to do, what have the other MPs, the Conservative MPs, for instance, got to do in order to avoid the embrace of the Referendum Party in that constituency?
We've advertised that if they are willing to give a real referendum, run in a fair way, that means with fair time split, a fair amount of money spent on both sides, not like the last time with the establishment. And as I say, I voted for going in on the Treaty of Rome, or staying in a fair way, on a question which answers the fundamental point I've just said, who governs Britain, then we would dissolve. We would have, and then all our members, some of which we don't even ask them whether they're for or against the referendum, they would go out and be able to campaign independently. We only have one purpose, and that is to stimulate this debate, and if we cannot get the referendum, to stand members and to try and force a referendum. That is, but we are agnostic otherwise.
The man 3rd in the 3rd row back.
And that seems to me to be wholly against everything you've just said in the past 25 minutes, where you've argued strongly against Europe.
Oh, yes.
The truth of the matter is the Referendum Party's fundamental premise is based on a falsehood. Britain can be an independent country, as you might put it, on the edge of Europe, isolated and poor, or it can be at the heart of Europe, playing its full part in defending our people's interests.
Right.
What we can't do, Sir James, is pick and choose those bits of Europe you think might be in our interests, and not take the obligations of what we have to do to make things like the single market and our people's interests really work.
Right. First, let me get rid of the first point. My views, I don't hide. I've written about them, I've campaigned for them. I campaigned for them the whole time in Strasbourg. But the views of the Referendum Party are to get a referendum and nothing else. And when we get a referendum, I'll be just one vote. Now, on your second point, I don't agree with you. You know, all the Europhiles will say Britain is isolated. Britain isn't isolated. If Britain blocks the process by using its veto now and using it systematically, it'll be, and don't think this is a joke, but I'll explain why. It'll be the other 14 nations that will be isolated, the governments of them. Why? Because they are all isolated from their own people. They are in a minority, just as in this country. Those who are in favor are in a minority. The polls show it. And they will be isolated from their own people.
But Sir James,
and leadership from Britain can change the whole structure of Europe, because there's an overwhelming tide from the peoples of Europe to go back to maintaining their identity.
The Prime Minister... I don't want to stop the clapping, it just takes up a bit of time. The Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary have said unambiguously in the House of Commons, Foreign Secretary in this programme, that they will exercise the veto in order to prevent any extension of majority voting, which would allow any of these things to go ahead. Do you just say that they are not believable when they say that?
They have a consistent record of appeasement. The Foreign Secretary who wrote and presented this document to the White Paper, Partnership of Nations, himself disclosed in the House of Commons some time ago that he was personally for the United States of Europe. The Prime Minister has tried to appease not only the other nations of Europe, but also both sides of his own party to avoid the split, and therefore we have moved forward purely on appeasement.
I put the point to you. I want to go back to our audience. The man in the pink shirt in the middle in the second row.
Sir James, someone once memorably put that sovereignty isn't like virginity. You've got it or you haven't. There are degrees of sovereignty, and I think the question which people want asked is the most effective level at which Britain is governed efficiently. That may be local level, it may be Westminster, or it may be the European Parliament. And there are many in this room who feel that there's a democratic deficit at the heart of Europe, which would best be addressed by reinforcing the powers of the European Parliament.
But the European Parliament, let me tell you, the European Parliament, I'm a member of it, I know it, of course I see it through my own view, but the European Parliament is not a democratic body. It is not a democratic body for a large number of reasons. One of them, it's far too distant from the people who elected. I haven't got the slightest idea who voted for me. Not the slightest. There are too many people. Nor does anyone else. On top of that, look at the turnout. People aren't interested. Who controls the European Parliament? It is one party controlling one project, federalism. And that one party englobes centre-left and centre-right, Social Democrats and Christian Democrats, to of which the Conservatives belong.
I want to bring a variety of views. I know that you've got important things to say. The woman sitting in the middle in the third row.
Can I quote you yesterday's Daily Mail, Simon Heffer? Very quickly, this is. There were many who thought, for example, that at the time of Britain's accession to the European Community in '73 and at Maastricht 20 years ago, the Queen should have warned her Prime Ministers then that such surrendering of sovereignty to a foreign power contradicted both her coronation oath and every Privy Councillor's oath. Please comment.
No, I'm going to... I think the comment is gives its own answer. I'm going to go to someone else in the audience. The man in the second row on the edge here.
Yes, can I take you up, Sir James, on your pedantic obsession with sovereignty? If sovereignty is the ability of a government to control the destiny of its country, that has passed away a long time ago. Britain was thrown out of the ERM by George Soros and the other independent currency market operators. We're supposed to have opted out of the social charter, but companies, in defiance of that opt-out, are setting up their own works councils. In London, the London International Financial Futures Exchange is preparing to express its longer-term interest rate contracts in euros, although we're supposed to have opted out of the single currency. I put it to you, Sir James, that you're living in the past, that in reality, sovereignty must lie in Europe or nowhere.
Now that you must comment on.
Oh, I welcome you. Please let me answer that. Absolutely. The very fact that you said you used the ERM as the example of loss of the fact that we were thrown out, which shows we haven't... The ERM was a supranational organization. It couldn't have been thrown out of your own currency. It was only because the currency was part of a European structure that Mr. Soros was able to use the ERM. So that argument goes against your argument. But there's something far more fundamental. We mustn't talk purely in economic terms. There are things which are more important and which cannot be measured. Now, you have in the world at the moment 31 conflicts, 31 wars. In each of those wars, it is nations trying to get out of artificial states. Let me give you examples.
If you can spare examples, make the general point.
Quickly. I mean, it goes from Canada to Belgium to Nigeria to Yugoslavia or ex-Yugoslavia, or in Czechoslovakia where it happened happily, all over the world, Africa, Nigeria, or in every continent. Now, what they tried to do, in each of these occasions, real nations were stifled, were fused into artificial states and controlled from the center. They did not work. They destroyed. People want their nations. They want their identity and their cultures.
Okay.
And everywhere created work. And we are trying to create the largest artificial state in history. 25 ancient nations and fuse them into one. It cannot work. It can only lead to disaster.
Okay, I'm going to take the woman down here in the front row.
Thank you. What I'd like to say is we're all here, whether we've got a view on Europe, that is not the issue. What Sir James is actually giving us is a platform for us all to join a debate and all to decide whether we want to be in Europe or against Europe.
Fine, I'll take the woman down here in the front, in the corner.
Yeah, I find a federal Europe a very frightening prospect, and I'm studying parliamentary reform at the beginning of the last century, and the main argument for this was industrial workers in places like Manchester and Leeds wondered how on earth people in central government could understand how they feel, and it makes me wonder how bureaucrats in Strasbourg and Brussels can understand how I feel, and it makes me feel that we're regressing, not progressing.
He's not going to disagree with that.
I'm very glad that Sir James has said that there are issues other than economics at stake here. I'd pick on just one, say the environment. Is he seriously suggesting that we can have 25 separate, nationally sovereign environmental policies in Europe, or do we need some sort of federal, supranational structure to bind the member states?
Well, let me answer this point.
With, let's just add in that, with a court to adjudicate and to enforce the supranational ruling.
Let me answer this particular point. Supranational, I am the Referendum Party, just to make it clear, only wants one thing, a referendum.
No, he's asking your opinion. Well, you've made that clear. He wants your view.
I just have to emphasize this because, you know, I can be attacked on all kinds of stuff. I'm irrelevant
but you wouldn't
to
be
this.
putting all this dosh into it if you didn't hold a very strong view, would you, Sir James?
Of course I hold a strong view, and I don't hide it. And my personal preference is a Europe based on a family of nations, which centralizes, which allows local government to have as much power as it can handle properly, regional government, national government. Now, wait a minute, I'm coming. Certain issues need to be centralized. Only a very small number of issues. And one of them is a transnational issue like environmental issues.
Now, on that...
They do not respect frontiers. The environmental things are one of the issues which I personally would see a European role for.
And you would accept in that context a supranational body that regulated, and presumably some form of court where rows could be adjudicated so that other member states couldn't do things that you didn't like.
Subject to the court being peopled by judges, and subject to it not having as an official agenda federalism. Its court, the purpose of the court should be to adjudicate on environmental issues.
But it would be sovereign, wouldn't it?
I would be for it first, sovereign, insofar as people live. That's one of the agreements.
You see,
that is one of the areas which I have made clear. I want a family of nations with a certain similar thing. But I'm willing to follow the verdict once a referendum has been held.
You want back in on that very briefly.
Whether my views are for or against, I would accept whatever the verdict comes in.
You are agreeing that there will be some issues, the environment's just one of many, on which there will be a sovereign European court that can bind the member states and oblige the member states to execute or not to execute various policies.
On a very limited number of issues, that is what I have written, and that is what I personally stand for.
The man down here in the front row.
Sir James, why, the first question showed it up, why do you think the Federalists are frightened of a referendum?
Because they know they'll lose.
OK, man there who's in the second row, second in.
Hello there. You said that in 1975 you said yes to a referendum. The people in Denmark said no, then they said yes. In France, they said yes. What happens, you wrote the book The Trap, if the people of Britain say yes to a referendum and go into Europe?
And,
what happens then?
And vote, in other words, for going to federalism?
Yes. Let things happen as they are.
This is a democratic...
Economic...
That would be the end of the story from your point of view.
As far as I'm concerned, it's the end of the story. But let me just take your other points. In France, it went 51-49 with all the press, all the establishment, all the political parties and all the money on one side. Yeah. In Denmark, they said no. They had the cheek to say no. And what happened? They said, go on voting until you say yes. Yeah. No one who said yes has been asked to vote yes.
Just on a couple of practical things. You've said you're going to stand. You've made no bones about that. Are you going to stand, as you've been rather coyly suggesting, against David Miller or in Putney or not?
That is the likelihood. I haven't coyly suggested. I was asked what's the most likelihood, and I said probably yes.
It will be. Secondly, John Redwood has asked to speak to you, talk to you. You going to do that?
Look, we're not against any established party. They want to come and talk to me, I'm happy to talk to anybody.
And if he says to you, look, you're really going to cause the sceptics in our party serious damage if you require them to make public statements of commitment to you, for heaven's sake, back off them, what will your response be?
Firstly, I haven't asked them to make commitments to me. I've asked them to make
publicly,
commitments.
No, publicly.
I've asked them to make commitments to their electorate.
Publicly.
Publicly.
And if he says don't do that...
Well, I've listened to his point of view and reject it.
As
far as I'm concerned, it will be open.
OK, I'm not saying you will say that. One more brief thing to you. You suggested to me that I'd misquoted you. And I have to tell you, this is the transcript. And in each of the areas that we've talked about, and in addition, foreign policy, you said, and I quote you exactly, in each one, we have given up or are giving up all rights.
Are giving up, that's right.
Yes, but...
that's right. Thank you very much. Thank you. That's all I said.
Well, hang on.
Thank you very much.
And I've suggested to you that you exaggerated your case by saying that we are giving up all our rights in this area.
And what I said, if you read it in context, is because we were threatened, because these proposals have been brought forward by all the institutions, and because the British government was appeasing and therefore likely to accept. So if you take it in context, you've just confirmed exactly what I've said, and it is you who's therefore exaggerated, taken out of context, and taken my words further than I put them.
That's people will judge make their own judgments about that.
The best thing, that is why we need a referendum. Let us have these debates. If the Referendum Party did not exist, we would not be having this debate. We need dozens of them on the single most important issue.
Sir James, thank you very much. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, very much. That's the end of this week's programme. Join me next Sunday, same time, same place. Till then, good afternoon.
The community has been totally transformed from an economic community to a political community.